So you've heard all the stories, huh? Problems. People keep telling your friends and family. And of course, the internet. You've heard all of it. And still, you're thinking Mexico might be a great place for a second or vacation home, or maybe like us, a perfect piece of paradise for your own retirement home. But still, there's this one nagging question you can't get out of your head. What if they're right? I mean, the drugs and the crime and the corruption. What if they're right? Do I really want to do this? Well, before we get into all that, let me just say this. We have our own 2,500 square foot home with custom everything on the drawing board right now for a beachfront property here at Rancho Costa Verde, just 3 hours south of friends and family in Southern California, on the coast of Baja, for an all-in price of just $360,000. Now, to us, that's no small investment. I mean, it might be compared to the millions they're getting for California beachfront, or what they're getting for Mazatlan or Puerto Vallarta or Cabo, but it's serious money for us. And again, remember, I've got more than a quarter century behind me representing the interests of clients that run the gamut from people like you and me to the Hiltons and the Hyatts of the world negotiating property acquisitions down here. My wife, she's got more than 40 years in federal banking and appraisal and real estate. So I got to tell you, we are more than careful when it comes to where we're going to invest our money because we're retired. This is it for us. So with that said, let's just talk about why we made the decision that this was going to be our place, paradise, in spite of our own friends and family and the internet and all the stories we heard telling us that we were crazy. And first up, I want to dispel the wholly erroneous idea that always comes up. Well, my Uncle Ernie told me that, you know what? Americans can't own property in Mexico. And he should know because he's a real estate agent. Uncle Ernie, I got to tell you, and all the other Uncle Ernies out there, you're misinformed. Because what you're actually, and all the other Uncle Ernies out there are thinking of, you're actually talking about the fact that, yeah, at one time, foreigners were prohibited from owning property down here, but not in all of Mexico. Just within what's called the restricted zone. And that's the area within 50 kilometers, or clicks as my military family calls them. It's just faster and easier that way. Anyway, 50 clicks from the coastline and 100 clicks from the border. Now that's about 32 and 64 miles if my math's right. So, with all that said, as Paul Harvey said, here's the rest of the story. Guys, the fact of the matter is that yeah, back in the early 90s, Mexico went to great lengths to allow foreigners to come in and buy real estate and own real estate. Because in Mexico, it took a constitutional amendment to do it, and that was no small effort, especially back then. But they did it. And why? Because it was good for the people? No. Well, I mean, yeah, it's part of it, but mostly it was because it benefited the government. Listen, with all due respect to you, Mexico, you got a well-deserved and long reputation for being broke. No other way to put it. So in 1914, the winner of the Mexican Revolution, a guy named Carranza, if you can call him that, he promised to change all that through something called a new constitution. 1917, just after the revolution. But you know what? By 1994, 77 years later, life for the people anyway hadn't really gotten any better, and the people were pissed. The people were really tired of their substandard living conditions because, respectfully, it sucked down here. I mean, sure, Carranza gave them these huge swaths of land, property to farm called ejidos, and we'll talk more about that later, but here's the problem. With little, if any, water in Mexico to grow crops, all he was really giving them was dirt. So beginning in the early 70s and really picking up steam in the 80s and early 90s when Bush, George H.W. that is, and Canada's Brian Mulroney and Mexico's Carlos Salinas, president, we're getting this thing called NAFTA together, with Mexico having really just two main components of their gross domestic product, or GDP, oil and gas. Well, that was a problem. It wasn't a lot to export. So we had to do something. Now, GDP is what the government can sell to other countries to make money, so they can keep the lights on, so to speak, just like we do. So Salinas decides to amend Article 27 of their Constitution to allow foreigners to come in and buy and own parcels of beachfront property inside the restricted zone. So they can subdivide it and either build resorts and the like, or sell it to foreigners for their vacation homes and retirement homes like us. That way, they could add their almost 6,000 miles of beautiful shoreline to their GDP and bring in millions, billions of dollars for their economy and add to their GDP. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that, of course, and I know that, and most people do, which we'll talk about when we get into another video, but that's about the crux of it. And that's why the multitudes of Uncle Ernies out there that are simply, you're just misinformed. Now, here's a cautionary caveat. Unless you're dealing with a large, well-established development company like, well, here at Rancho Costa Verde, or Sotheby's, or CBRE, or really any one of the decades-old corporations with a proven reputation for integrity, dealing with sellers down here is extremely perilous. And I really mean to use the word extremely and perilous. Because letting alone the fact that you don't know these people from Adam, Mexico doesn't license or regulate the people who are allowed to sell real estate down here. Allowed. Who allows them? That's right. There's no such thing as a real estate agent or broker down here in Mexico, no matter what they say. There's no licensure, no background check, no experience, no training, no regulation, and most importantly, there's no recourse if something goes wrong. Now, add that to the fact that Mexico law dictates that all of the paperwork, and there is a mountain of it, it all has to be in Spanish, just the same as all the paperwork in the U.S. is in English. Do that, and you start to see where the problem is. Unless you're completely fluent in Spanish, how are you going to know what you're signing, much less what you're reading? And there's no provision that it be translated into English for you either. So as I said, unless you're dealing with a reliable, well-established development company with agents licensed agents, preferably in the U.S., so they're bound by law as your fiduciary, so you'll have some recourse in the United States at least if something goes wrong. This isn't the time or the place to start treating your investment like you would in the U.S. It's a completely different animal down here. And anyone thinking of buying a home or property down here, let's just say you'd be well advised to retain competent real estate counsel, an agent, a broker, a lawyer. I don't care, anyone who's successfully dealt with the complexities of Mexican real estate law down here and speaks the language fluently. Because I got to tell you, it's cheap insurance when you're putting your own $360,000 into your own piece of paradise down here. So now when your Uncle Ernie says, oh, it's probably just a lease or a timeshare because you can't own property in Mexico, and I should know because I'm a real estate agent. Well, let's just say that now you know that you can and exactly why, so you can have this discussion with Uncle Ernie. Now let's talk about another internet fallacy, and that's a land grab by Mexican federales and this wholly ridiculous notion that they're going to come in when you finish your house, steal it away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Bull. It hasn't happened, it didn't happen, no matter what the internet says, and it's not going to happen. And I'm going to tell you why in the next video.